Okay, everybody. So this is our last unit for the semester. This is Unit 6, Cities and Urban Land Use Patterns and Processes. So we're just going to kind of take a look at what cities look like, why they look like that, what are some of the impacts of different designs of cities and infrastructure and things like that. So here we go. 6.1. So this is the origins and influences of urbanization. So, when did urbanization start? And again, just looking at this top sentence here, the presence and growth of cities varies across geographical locations because of physical geography and resources. So, depending on the geography and resources of different areas, cities will either or not spring up. Okay, so we're going to be looking at site and situation, which are things that we've looked at before, and then changes in these things and how they might impact cities. So, here we go. So, site and situation definitely influence the origin, function, and growth of cities. So remember, site, this is just your definition here. The place where the settlement is located, it is the absolute location. All right. And so when we think about site, I want you to think about things like, what are some of the physical characteristics of where you're at? Is there a water source? What's the soil quality like? What's the climate like? Are there any other natural resources there? And so, if you look at Tucson, we have our own set of factors dealing with site. Water is more of an issue. Cactuses are not. Okay. And so, anyway, if you look at a place like the Nile civilization, developed along a river, and so we can see kind of why that developed there. All right. They had fresh water along the river, food along the river. The flooding caused fertile soil, temperate climate, and then the desert that was around them provided for this natural defense. And so there are a lot of characteristics about the site of where the Nile civilization started that were beneficial. Situation is where you are in relation. This is your relative location. All right. And so a lot of cities develop along trade routes, rivers and ports, things like that. If you look at Constantinople or Istanbul, that's basically in between two continents, Europe and Asia. And so that location, that situation, the relative location, made it a very, it's not a surprise that became a city. It was along a trade route, and it basically kind of joined those two continents. Okay, it was along the Silk Road, if anybody recalls that, the trading route. All right, so let's look at, and here's another example of how situation can influence how and where a city develops. So again, coming back to our old friend, the BMW factory, and this is in Spartanburg, and this is the port in Charleston, and so which is here. And so the idea here is that this city in Spartanburg can develop because of where it's at, in large part, or at least the BMW factory and things that spring up around that, in large part because of the railroads, especially, but the waterways and the ports, those are important as well. And so, you can see that, depending on what levels of transportation are available, that will allow a city to either grow or to stay relatively small. When you look at if you're familiar with Route 66, went across the country, a lot of cities were along Route 66, and then we got the highway system, and the highway system bypassed a lot of those cities, and a lot of those cities just kind of went away, became very, very small because of that proximity to major transportation. So, yeah. So let's look at urbanization real quick and so, kind of the history of it. So obviously, early humans were nomadic, meaning they wandered around looking for food, and then when we had the ability to grow crops, then people started to stay in one place. Okay, and so those are the hearths that we talked about before, the Fertile Crescent in Southwest Asia. And some of the other ones, we'll look at a map here in just a second. And so, when they became settled, more people started coming in there, and then the city started to develop. They were generally agricultural villages at first, and then they kind of grew over time. All right. And so farmers were able to produce a surplus of crops, which led more people to be able to pursue other occupations. And we've talked about that, kind of the agricultural revolution. This is the share of population living in urbanized areas from 10,000 BCE up until almost today. And you can see, we got this hockey stick approach going. So remember, that is the Industrial Revolution. And so, freed up a lot of agricultural labor, and we started factories, things like that. People moved into the cities for jobs, and so that's the industrialization, big, 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 big influence on urbanization. And you can see over the last, what's this, 50 years or so, 55, 60 years, where we are in terms of urban population versus rural. And so this is in the world. So urban population's up here, rural. So the rural is kind of flattening out a bit, and the urban population is still growing. And these are in terms of numbers, not percentages over here. All right. So this is the share of people living in urban areas. And so you can see the majority of the world lives in urban areas. So here in the US, what do we match up with down here? Around 70%, something like that. And most of the countries are kind of 60% or above. Some very dark, like over here, if you look at Japan, that'd be up in this area. But so you can see most of the world is living in an urban area, and this is by region. So Asia, 89% live in urban areas, all the way down to the U.S. or North America. I'm sorry. In North America, we're at 73.3% compared to 89% for Asia. So a pretty decent difference there. All right, so let's look at a couple of things that can influence urbanization. So transportation and communication can definitely have a big impact. Population growth can have a big impact. Migration either into or out of an area can have a big impact. The economic development of the area, and also government policies. All right, and so these are just some terms that I want you to be familiar with. Socioeconomic stratification. It is differentiation in society based on wealth or power, production or prestige. And so this is the economic inequality that we've talked about, and that exists in countries. And then and it's all about scale. Globally, there's inequality, nationally or regionally inequality, nationally inequality, subnationally. And if you look at cities like Tucson, there's socioeconomic stratification here, and there is everywhere. And the degree of that inequality can differ, but anyway, the first urban revolution, agricultural and socioeconomic innovations that led to the rise of early cities. And so that was the first time we have all these people coming in. Now, factors that do influence urbanization. So transportation is a big one. We'll look at a better example here in just a second. The more innovations there are in transportation, that's going to shape where people live. If there's a lack of transportation, people tend to cluster up a lot more, pack in a lot more, and as transportation develops, we start to see this spread, especially in North America. So transportation has a lot to do with communication networks, especially think about during the pandemic, how that has highlighted the effectiveness of new communication and where people might live. Okay, we'll look at an example of that in just a second. Rural to urban migration. Again, this is the movement of people who are living out in the countryside, generally farmers moving into the city for jobs. And then redevelopment, set of activities intended to revitalize areas. Okay, and so Detroit is the example that comes to mind when we talk about revitalization efforts. Detroit was this big booming city in the mid 1900s, 1960s, 70s, and then it slowly started to not do well until the early 2000s. It was not good, and so they've been trying to revitalize it. All right, so let's take a look. Changes in transportation and communication, how they influence urbanization. So here's just some examples. Streetcars. If streetcars are the main mode of transportation, people living in the city. Once cars, become predominant, people move to the suburbs. All right. When highways become more prevalent, businesses can now move because they can transport their products. Now we have landlines, gives us even more options, like telephone lines, cell phones, and the internet. Now we can go international. You don't have to live in one place if you can work remotely. You can live anywhere. And 5G, same kind of thing. So this is in terms of transportation. So we'll look at communication here in just a second, but transportation. So this is a proposed high-speed rail network for the United States. And so we can see here's Phoenix and here's Tucson. And according to this, it would be about a 73-minute ride from Tucson to Phoenix or vice versa. And so, is that reasonable that, somebody might say, hey, I want to work in Phoenix, but I want to live in Tucson, or they might have a stop, I don't know, somewhere halfway in between, and that might cause people to live there. And so, just the technology of the transportation system is going to be a big deal. The other thing, when we talk about communication technology, and this one's pretty interesting, and this is a city that I drove through and thought was beautiful, and my wife and I were like, hey, this would be a fun place to live, and so does everybody else. So this is, COVID-19 brings unexpected boom to small Colorado towns. So this is a place called, I think they pronounce it Salida, Colorado. And so since the pandemic started and people started working remotely, a lot of people realized, hey, I don't need to live in a big city to do my job. I just need to live somewhere where I have good internet, And so, if a lot of people have started to move outside of the cities and move into these smaller towns because of this. I mean, look at this. That's beautiful. And so, this is the technology is changing where people are going to live, because now a lot of people can do their jobs remotely. And so they can live in these small towns. And that's, there's good and bad to that. Some people like to stay small. Some people want their city to grow. Small can be weird, which is kind of fun. And you don't want to lose that thing that makes you unique. But at the same time, property values rise and all that kind of good stuff. So, but this remote work has become a boom, which has become a boom for a lot of these smaller cities. All right. And finally, economic development. Cities' economic function will have an impact on urbanization. So their economic function, manufacturing, tourism, services, government, and political. So this is the revitalization thing. And revitalization just means to bring back. So this is Detroit. This is an area of Detroit, like a waterfront, before revitalization, and this is after. And this takes money. You got to put some money into this to make it happen. Kind of if you've heard the phrase "build it and they will come," then this is kind of the idea. But there's lots of images like this from Detroit. Kind of a before and after, and so this is appealing for sure. This would look like a fun place to be. This looks kind of depressing. So, and then lastly, some of the government policies talking about how they influence urbanization. So, what if you're the government? What can you do to make your city attractive? All right, and that's kind of the thing. So, governments want to focus on good schools. Is it safe? Are there entertainment options? Is there accessible transportation? They can give cash grants or rebates or tax credits, things like that. And so, think about Tucson. Do we have this? I think so. By the way, UHS just came out as the number 17 high school in the country. All right. Number 1 in Arizona for traditional schools, and number 2 in Arizona for all high schools. So that doesn't suck. But anyway, so take a look at Amazon real quick. So Amazon HQ2 was the name of their second headquarters, and so they're going to build this new headquarters in a new city. And so they went and cities around the world, they were saying, hey, can you put a proposal together for us? And so if you take a look over here, HQ2 was announced in 2017. Request for proposals. So this is from cities, Government's Economic Development Corporation, asking for tax breaks and other incentives to entice the company, noting that it needed to spend $5 billion in construction and that HQ2 would house 50,000 workers when completed. And so think about this. This is what Amazon wanted, and this is what $5 billion in construction and 50,000 jobs, this is what they had to offer. And so cities went all out, okay? And I think they ended up settling in Arlington County, Virginia. And they might have actually split these, but anyway, so that's the influence of a government policy. All right, so that's it for 6.1, right at 15 minutes, not bad. All righty, I'll take care.